History is full of many interesting debates. From ancient times to now, people love to give their 2 cents on what really happened during some of the more famous events throughout time. One of the most controversial topics is the answer to the question, who really discovered America? Most believe the textbook version that it was Christopher Columbus in 1492. Others think a Viking named Leif Erikson was blown off course while returning from Greenland in around the year 1000 and was actually the first European to discover the continent. And then there are some really outlandish theories, like the one that suggests that ancient Egyptians had somehow visited the Americas. And as crazy as that sounds, there is actually evidence to support it. So, in this video, we thought it would be fun to delve into some of the theories and arguments around this topic, and then tell you who really discovered the Americas. So stick around to the end. Let's dive in. We'll start with the mainstream theory, Christopher Columbus setting sail for India in 1492, and by sheer luck, stumbled across a new continent. Chris made 4 voyages the Atlantic from Spain in his lifetime, and apparently, up until the day he died, he believed he found a super quick route to India. The European powers at the time of the 1400s were all scrambling for the best trade routes between Europe, Africa, and Asia, so it makes sense that someone would propose a quicker route. After Columbus's findings of new land, the official age of discovery would begin. Other European nations, particularly Spain, were eager to share in the seemingly limitless riches of the Far East, and a new race to colonize and steal the riches of this new land would begin. But does this mean they were the first people, outside of the natives living there, that had ever set foot there? Well, don't you think it's interesting that for the whole of modern civilization, which is estimated to be at least 6,000 or so years old, no one else had thought to test the waters that lie west? Scholars agree Christopher Columbus was not the first person to propose that a person could reach Asia by sailing west from Europe. In fact, scholars argue that the idea is almost as old as the idea that the Earth is round. That is, it dates back to early Rome. So could there have been any other attempts made? And could they have been successful? Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red, was a Norse explorer from Iceland, a Viking. Eric the Red founded the first Norse settlement in Greenland. Discovery and expansion ran through their blood as Leif went on to travel much farther, to America. According to the sagas of Icelanders, he established a Norse settlement at Vinland, which is debatably in Newfoundland, modern-day Canada. For many years, this was thought to be only a mythological story, more myth than reality. But archaeological evidence has shown, beyond a doubt, that Vikings reached Canada. So sorry, Columbus, you weren't the first European to set foot on the Americas. Do they still teach that in schools? Because if they do, that needs a serious rewrite. The first Viking archaeological site in the New World is L'Anse aux Meadows, a 1,000-year-old way station discovered in 1960 on the northern tip of Newfoundland. When archaeologists discovered another site, the second Viking settlement in America, things became much clearer. Not only have Vikings visited the American continent, but they actually colonized some parts of it, or at least attempted to do so. The full story gets a little hazy, as apart from the archaeological evidence, we only have the Viking sagas to refer to about what really happened. But what they say is very interesting. Icelandic sagas claim that in 1004, Leif's brother Thorvald Eiríksson was said to have sailed with a crew of 30 men, spending the following winter at Leif's camp. In the spring, Thorvald attacked the local population and was ultimately killed by an arrow, but his crew appears to have remained in place. Just 5 years later, in 1009, Thorfinn the Valiant supplied 3 ships with livestock and 160 men and women, a proper colony. Accounts differ as to what happened to this colony, but the sagas mention a peace agreement between the indigenous peoples and the Norsemen. This theory is becoming more mainstream, and TV shows and movies are starting to portray it. I think everybody would love a story about Native Americans meeting Vikings. The Vikings seem to have treated them better than the later Europeans did anyway. So we've established America was discovered around 1000 AD by Vikings, but could anyone have got there even earlier? The answer is yes. Another population who probably visited America way before Columbus are the Polynesians. The main clue for this is the sweet potato plant yam. The oldest carbonized sweet potato evidence in the Pacific hails back to about 1000 AD, 500 years before Columbus sailed to the Americas. But it wasn't a convincing enough proof, so it remained as a hunch more than anything else. However, French scientists found better samples from a herbarium collected by early European explorers. Through genetic analysis, they were able to show that Polynesians took the sweet potatoes from America and spread them across Southeast Asia and the Pacific. There are also studies which link Brazilian DNA to that of Polynesians, though another recent study put the findings under question. It seems very likely that Polynesians did reach America and establish some kind of trade route. If this happened, it was before Columbus's time, but it's not clear if it was before the Vikings. Another intriguing analysis on Peruvian mummies found that at least one such mummy had been embalmed using resin from a tree that only grew in Oceania and New Guinea. Both the mummy and the tree were dated to 1200 AD. So Pacific Islanders also got there before Columbus, but we have no way of knowing the exact time frames. These three theories are the only ones that hold any solid evidence to back them, but there are some really wild ones we still think are worth mentioning. We'll start with the China First theory. It asserts that a Muslim Chinese eunuch mariner from the Ming Dynasty discovered America, 71 years before Columbus. Zheng, he was a real historical figure who commanded a huge armada of wooden sailing vessels in the early 15th century. He explored Southeast Asia, India, and the east coast of Africa using navigational techniques that were, at the time, cutting edge. One researcher, Gavin Menzies, is convinced that Admiral Zheng must have got to America, but most historians think the idea is completely bonkers. But if Columbus and some Vikings could do it, why not? Probably the most interesting theory is that somehow ancient Egyptians were in the Americas. The main basis of this claim is that mummies were discovered that had traces of coca, the main ingredient in cocaine, and nicotine in their bodies. These two plants were said to only have been growing in South America in those days. Historians completely disagree and think there is evidence that tobacco was actually found in ancient China and could have come from trade with those parts of the world. And the coca? Well, they were never able to explain that one, but people think it's more likely it was a cross-contamination, maybe by one of the researchers who liked to party. Another claim about ancient Egyptians in America is the presence of pyramids. It's an interesting take, but there are pyramids found on almost every continent, so it doesn't really prove the ancient Egyptians were there. Finally, we've got a claim from the Roman times that, although doesn't hold much weight, is worth mentioning nonetheless. Pomponius Mela, who wrote around AD 43, was the earliest known Roman geographer, made a claim that the consul of Gaul, Quintus Caecilius Metellus Scilla, was given people from India by the king of the Sueves. Upon requesting why they were in this land, he learnt that they were caught in a storm away from India, that they became castaways, and finally landed on the coast of Germania. They thus resisted the sea, but suffered from the cold for the rest of their travel, and that is the reason why they left. Some historians believe it's more likely these people would be American Indians than actually coming from India, but a deeper investigation into the claim has never been done. There are loose claims from almost every other culture about getting to America, but most hold almost no weight. Except this one. Anyone else ever thought that the features on these Olmec heads look a little bit African? It wouldn't be that far-fetched to To suggest that West African civilizations may have got to America, just look at a map. They're pretty close. This could also explain some of the seemingly similar technologies and plants found in both continents. But when exactly did this happen? Well, if it did, scholars have stated that it was probably by the Mali Empire around 1300. This is mainly thought because of a passage from Columbus's own journal, where he states that canoes were found from West Africa that they believed had sailed west with merchandise. And the claims of the native inhabitants of the Caribbean island of Hispaniola that there had come to Hispaniola from the south and southeast a black people who have the tops of their spears made of a metal which they call guanin. This is all from Christopher Columbus's own journal and suggests that his third voyage west was to test these claims. It sounds like he believed it was possible. Some scholars, however, think that a migration from Africa to South America happened a lot earlier than 1300. Some think humans might have come not overland from Asia, but by boat from Africa, with the journey taking place 100,000 years ago, well before the accepted dates for the earliest human migrations that led to the prehistoric settlement of the Americas. This is pretty far-fetched, and there isn't much evidence, except the fact that in South American folklore and spirituality, they speak about a winged god called Quetzalcoatl that came from the east, and as sun disk researchers believe that the Mandinka people from West Africa have a culture that is very similar to these symbols. These theories are all very interesting to consider, but the people who really discovered America, we believe, were the tribes that made the long, arduous journey from Asia in prehistoric times and would later be known as the Native Americans. Maybe they had influences from other lands since then, and it looks like it was likely. But they were the first and also created cultures and civilizations and thrived in the land for many thousands of years. Anyone else who may have arrived in ancient times left almost no trace and didn't have much of an impact on the continent. What do you think? Do you believe any of these theories? Who would you say were the first people to discover America? Let us know.